Welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study. This week we'll be going through Parashath BeShallah, which will be in Exodus chapter 13, starting at verse 17, and hopefully we'll make it through to chapter 17, verse 16. So I'll just wait a little bit, and as usual, for the people to show up before I begin to read. This week we'll be streaming not only to YouTube and Facebook, but we'll also be streaming to what's this other one here? I forgot the name of it. It's a streaming platform for video game users. I don't really understand what it's all about, but it's another platform, so I said, why not? I can't remember what it's called. So I hope everyone had a great week, and I hope you're all enjoying your Shabbat. So if you can hear me, I see there's one person in the audience. If you can hear me okay, then type a 1 in the comments. If you can't hear me okay, then type a 2. And if you don't type anything, then I know you don't hear me at all. Okay, I got a 1. From Serafina. All right, watching on YouTube. Thank you for joining us today. So at about 5 minutes, I'll begin to read. That's about when I normally start, and hopefully everyone will start to trickle in. I would play some background music, but there's something with the copyright infringement rules on YouTube. If anytime we play background music or any kind of music, then they flag our videos. And normally they'll end up cutting out that section where the music is played. Shabbat Shalom, Serafina. That's a cool name, Serafina. So the audience is growing. So everyone joining, if you can type a 1 if you hear me okay, or type a 2 if you don't. And if you So it said my browser lost control of my mic for a minute. Hopefully that's back. Let's turn my Bluetooth off here.
Disconnected.
No, I know it's not on my cell phone. Okay, so we are now at the 5-minute mark, and I will begin to read. This is Parashath BeShallah, which begins in Shemot chapter 13, verse 17, excuse me. And so we will begin with the first aliyah. ويهي بشلح פרעה את העם ולא נחם אלוהים דרך ארץ פלשתים כי קרוב הוא. כי קרוב הוא. כי אמר אלוהים פן ינהם העם בראותם מלחמה ושבו מצרימה. And it was so that as Pharaoh sent the people away, that Elohim did not guide the people in the way of the Philistines, the Palestinians, because it was near. For Elohim had said, lest the people Yidnahim, which means basically to change their mind, as they see war, and they return to Egypt. Shabbat Shalom, Nicola. Thank you for joining us today. Verse 18. ويتسيف Elohim et ha'am deret hamidbar yamsuf وحموشيم علو بني Yisrael me'eret Mitzrayim. So Elohim took the people or led the people around the way of the wilderness towards Yamsuf. And the children of Israel went up from Egypt, Hamushim. Literally, that means in the 50s, but it's talking about being armed for battle. And it's basically the same thing, saying that he led them up according to their armies. Verse 19. ويكح موسى את עצמות יוסף עמו כי השביע את בני ישראל לאמור פקוד יפקוד אלוהים אתכם והעליתם את עצמותי מזה אתכם. And so Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because he had made the children of Israel swear, saying, Elohim will certainly visit you and bring you up, or actually, and you shall bring up my bones with you from here. Verse 20. ويسرعوا مسكوف ويهنوا بإثام بقصها مدبار. And so they journeyed from Sukkot, and they encamped at Etham, at the edge of the wilderness. Now, we didn't get to go over this last Shabbat. We ended up talking way too long on certain things, and so we didn't cover it. But we talked about in last week's parasha the first Pesach. Why my microphone keeps cutting out. But anyway, we spoke then about the Pesach and the days of Matzot. Now, Aldo and I spoke with Moses and Aaron while they were in Egypt. This was more than likely before the 10th of the month, because he told them to tell the Israelites on the 10th of the month you shall select a lamb. In those instructions, the Israelites were told, or he told Moses and Aaron, that they shouldn't have chametz with the Pesach, so that they were to not eat chametz. So they shouldn't have been even thinking about having normal bread during these 7 days, because that was already explained to them. So when they came out, it said that they carried their beitzah, which is wet dough, in their kneading troughs on their shoulders. It was wrapped up. And what I want to explain to you about that is they traveled, and it talks about it there, from Sukkoth and or from Ramses to Sukkoth. Now, according to rabbinic law, you have to prepare your matzah. You have approximately 18 minutes from the time the water touches the flour until the time it's been baked and prepared and put on the table. Otherwise, it's considered chametz. Now, I can't tell you exactly how far it is from Ramses to Sukkot, but I can almost promise you that it was more than 18 minutes from the time that water touched the dough, which is what is said in the Parashath. They took their dough on their in their kneading troughs with them. So you have wet dough being carried from Ramses to Sukkot. So that nullifies any rabbinical ordinance talking about an 18-minute time limit on how long you should take to make your matzah. And so I just remember that when reading through verse 20. And so it says that they traveled, or they journeyed from Sukkoth, and they encamped at Etham at the edge of the wilderness. So verse 21. وأدونai هولech לפניהם יומם בעמוד ענן לנחותם הדרך ולילה בעמוד אש להאיר להם ללכת יומם ולילה. And so Adonai was going before them daily, or by day, in a column of cloud to show them the way, and during the night, the column of fire to illuminate for them, or to give them light, so that they can travel day and night. Okay. Verse 22. Lo yamish amud ha'anan yomam wa amud ha'esh layla lifnei ha'am. And he didn't allow the column of the cloud to be removed daily, nor the column of the fire nightly from before the people. So it remained at all times either a column of cloud or a column of fire. And interestingly, it says that in this column of fire, you had something called the Arafel, which is this really intense darkness that was intermingled with the fire itself. And it was interesting because it says that God, the Adonai, he dwelled, or okay, I don't know how much you heard, but anyways, this column of fire came down upon Mount Sinai, and it says that when Moses went up to speak with God, he went in to the Arafel where God was. And so that's interesting. So I apologize, we're having sound problems. Let me see what I can do here. Audio. helps. I hope that helps. I hope that stops. If you guys can hear me now, please go ahead and just type 1 so I'll know that you're hearing what I'm saying. Of course, there's always a delay. All right, so the sound seems to be okay. Hopefully that stays okay. I don't know what the problem is. Anyways, now we're starting on chapter 14, the first verse. وَيَدَبَّرْ Adonai Moshe lemor. Adonai spoke with Moses, saying, verse 2. Shabbat Shalom, Richard. Thanks for joining us here. Hopefully the sound remains. Verse 2, for those joining, we're already on chapter 14, verse 2. دبر بني إسرائيل ويشوبوا ويهنوا לפني في حهيرو بين مجدول وبين هيام לפني بعل صفون نقحو تحنو al hayam. Speak to the children of Israel that they return and that they camp before Pi Hahiro, between Migdol and the sea, before Baal Zephon, which literally means the Lord of the North. Before it, you shall camp at the sea. So they traveled from Sukkot, they went to Etam, and then they were told to go backwards. So to go back. So basically what they did, they had to backtrack a little to get to this place that we're speaking of now. Verse 3. وأمر פרעה לבני ישראל נבוכים הם בארץ. صغار عليهم המדבר. Now this is still speaking to Moses. He says, and Pharaoh will say to about the children of Israel that they are wandering aimlessly in the land. Now this is an interesting word, this nebuchim, which basically means perplexed. It's like they're lost, they don't understand what they're doing or where they're going, which you can basically understand. They went from one place to another and told to go back. So obviously they were perplexed. The idea was that they would have no place to go. And Nebuchim is actually interesting too. Maimonides wrote a book called Mori Nebuchim, which means the guide for the perplexed. He uses the same word. So Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel that they are wandering confused in the land, and that the wilderness has shut them in. Verse 4. وحزقتي את לב פרעה ורדף אחריהם ויקבדה בפרעה ובכל חילו וידעו מצרים כי אני אדוני ויעשו כן. And I will harden the heart of Pharaoh, and he will pursue them. And which literally means I will make myself great with Pharaoh and with his army, and Egypt will know that I am Adonai. And so they did. Verse 5. Let me just check the comments real quick. Okay, everything looks good. So anytime the sound goes out, just hey, sounds out or type a 2. Just when I look up and see a bunch of 2s, I'll know that the sound went out again. All right, verse 5. ويقاد لملك مصرعيم كي براح عام ويهفيخ لبعض فرعه وعبضاف إلها عام. Evidently. So I'll try it that way. All right, so I took it off my headset now. It should be coming from my computer again. I have no idea what the problem is here. Maybe I'll have to buy a new Bluetooth. So before I continue to read, let me just make sure everyone can hear me. Thank you for the 2s, by the way. I saw the 2s immediately. Okay, I see a 1 from Nicola. Can hear you again. Okay, so let's move on then. So it was reported to the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants turned again to the people. And they said, "What have we done? Because we have sent away Israel from our service." Verse 6. وَيَسَارْ et رِكْبُهُ وَإِذْ عَمُّهُ لَقَحْ إِمُّهُ. And so he harnessed, or he tied, or he bound his rikbo, which is his the riders or the chariots and his people. He took with him. Verse 7. ويقح 600 רכב בחור וכל רכב מצרים ושלישים על כולו. And so he took 600 chosen riders, and as well as all the other riders of Egypt. And it says وَشَلِشِيم عَلَى كُلُّهُ, which basically means he put a third with him. And there's some commentary about what that actually means. Some people seem to think that in the chariot you had a rider and the defender, and then the third would be one who actually shot the arrows. But some people think that when you say Shadashim, then it just simply means that each person had a commander of the charioteer commanders. Verse 8. Verse 8. ويحزق أدوناي את לב פרעה מלך מצרים וירדוף אחרי בני ישראל ובני ישראל יוצאים ביד רמה. And so Adonai hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel. And the children of Israel, they left out high-handedly, biyad ramah, with a high hand. All right, so we have to understand that the Israelites went out, chemoshim, which means in battle array. They went out also according to their armies. Each tribe, you could say each tribe was was a military unit, and you probably even had subunits in those. So they also said that they went out with a high hand, so that they weren't in a weak position when they went out. However, the concern was that they would lose heart if they ended up going to war. And interestingly, he didn't lead them the short way, which would be towards the way that Palestine. He ended up having them closed in or locked in against the sea. And so the whole point of that was that Israel would see and know that he is Adonai, and also the Egyptians will know that too. Verse 9, this is actually the beginning of the second Aliyah. Verse 9. وَيُرْدِفُ مِصْرَيِّم أَخَرَيْهِمْ وَيَسِيغُوا أَوْثَامْ حُنِمْ عَلْى الْحَيَامْ كُلْ سُوسْ رَيْخ پَرْعَوْ وَپَرَشَاو وَحِلَو على بِحَحِيرَوْت لِفْنَي بَعَال سَفْعُون. And so Egypt pursued after them and caught up with them, camping at the sea. Every horse and rider of Pharaoh, his Parashath, which means a horseman, basically, or it could be a horse. His horsemen and his army. So they called them camping at the sea at Pi-Hahiroth, which was in the presence of, or before, or in front of Ba'al Sifon. Verse 10. Ufar'o Hikrib ويسأوا بني إسرائيل את عينيهم وهنا מצרים נוסע אחריהם ויראו מאוד ויצעקו בני ישראל אל אדוני. And Pharaoh drew near, and the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and they beheld Egypt traveling after them. And they were greatly afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to Adonai. Verse 11. وَيَوْمَرُوا إِلْ Moshe. And so they said to Moses, המבלי אין קברים במצרים לקחתנו למות במדבר מה זאת עשית לנו להוציאנו ממצרים. And so they said to Moses, is it because there were no graves or tombs in Egypt that you have brought us out in the wilderness to die? What is this that you have done to us to bring us up out of Egypt? And this is going to be a common complaint throughout the travels. And interestingly, I can't remember exactly, but I think when we get to the story of Korah, that after the rebellion of Korah, and him and his cohorts were dealt with, I think the complaining actually ended. Verse 12. הלא זה הדבר אשר דיברנו אליך במצרים לאמור חדל ממנו ונעבדה את מצרים כי טוב לנו עבוד את מצרים במותנו במדבר. Isn't this the thing that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying Hadal Meminu, which literally means leave off, leave us alone, get away from us. and let us serve Egypt, because it's good for us to serve Egypt than to die in the wilderness. Which means basically this is a comparative saying it's better for us to serve Egypt than to die in the wilderness. Verse 13. ويومر موسى الحام أل تراؤوا התייצבו וראו את ישועת אדוני אשר יעשה לכם היום, כי אשר ראיתם את מצרים היום לא תוסיפו לראותם עוד ad olam. And so Moses said to the people, don't be afraid. Gather together and behold or look at the salvation of Adonai, that which he shall do for you today. Because you've seen the Egyptians today, those Egyptians that you've seen today, you will no longer see them forever. Meaning not Egypt in general, because we know that's not the case, but these specific Egyptians who followed them and wanted to bring them back to slavery or to destroy them. I don't think they wanted to destroy them, actually. They wanted to bring them back into service. But he said, you will no longer see them forever. Verse 14. Adonai yilahim lachem wa'atem taharishun. Adonai will wage war for you, and you will be silent. You will shut your mouths and not say a word. So that's the end of the second aliyah, and now we begin the third aliyah in verse 15. Shabbat Shalom, Shaya. So we're on chapter 14, verse 15 at the moment for all those who are joining us now. Verse 15. وَيَوْمَرْ أَدُونَي إِلَى مُوسَى مَا تَسْعَىٰ إِلَيَّ دَبَّرْ إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل وَيِسْعُوا. And so Adonai spoke to Moses, what are you crying out to me? Speak to the children of Israel and let them journey. Yisrael, let them be on their journey. Verse 16. Now, this is an interesting statement. It's a really interesting statement. They're on the sea. They're camped on the sea. They're closed in, which is what prompted Pharaoh to come after us. Hey, they're closed in. They're lost. They're evidently confused what they're supposed to do. Now they have the sea, and then they have the Egyptian army, the entire Egyptian army behind them. And God tells them, what you crying out to me for? Tell them to be about their journey. Where are they going, right? That's the question. So then he says in verse 16, Wa'ata, as for you, harim et maktecha, unate et yadecha al hayam, ubiqa'ehu, ويبوء بني إسرائيل بتوخ hayam bayabasha. And as for you, raise up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and split it. And let it be split. And let the children of Israel go in the midst of the sea on dry ground. Yabasha. Verse 17. وأني هنني محزيخ את לב מצרים ויבואו אחריהם ויקבדה בפרעה ובכל חילו ברך בו ובפרשה. And As for me, behold, I will take hold of the heart of Egypt, or I will harden the heart of Egypt, that they follow after them, and I will make myself great against Pharaoh and against his army, his chariots and the horsemen. Verse 18. ويدعو مصريم كأني أدوناي بكبدي بفرعون بركبه وبفرشة. And the Egyptians will know that I am Adonai, as I make myself great against Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen. Verse 19. ويسع ملأ האלוהים החולך לפני מחנה ישראל, וילך מאחריהם, ויצא עמוד הענן מפניהם, ויעמוד מאחריהם. And so the angel of God, the one that was going before the camp of Israel. Now, we spoke about this also last Shabbat, about the pillar of fire and these statements that we see often in the Torah, that you have Adonai who's doing something, and then it speaks in the third person. So you have him speaking in the first person, I'm going, or I will move out, which is what was said, and then it will say in the third person, but the destroyer, or he, or his presence, or his angel will go. So you have this first person, third person in the same context. So here we have the same thing here. It says at the beginning of the parasha that it was Adonai. Verse 21, Adonai holech lifneihem yomam ba'amod anan. And so Adonai was the one going before them daily in the column of cloud. And here we have it saying that it was the Melech Elohim, this angel, the one who was going before them, before the camp of Israel. So this angel, we will see later in, I think, chapter 23. He tells Moses, my angel, I'm sending my angel before you. My name is in him, which is why he's called the Melech Adonai, and he's also basically equated with Adonai. They're interchangeable. Also, it's interesting. I spoke about this with some of my friends that we studied together during the week. In Numbers chapter 7, verse 89, we have this instance where Moses is coming into the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, and it says as he's going in, he heard the voice and of one that was speaking to him. Well, the word for speaking is middaber. Now, this is a hitpael, which basically means he was speaking to himself. We see the same statement in Ezekiel chapter 2. In Ezekiel chapter 2, I think it's verse 2, Ezekiel says, a spirit entered into me, and as he entered into me, I heard him speaking to himself to me. All right. And so basically, what we're talking about here is this Melech Adonai, who was actually in the pillar of fire and cloud. This is the representation of God in the physical realm. We see it's in Exodus. I can't remember exactly where it's at, but Moses asked God, says, show me your chavod. Okay? Now, that's an interesting request. He says, show me your kavod. In chapter 16, we'll see that the Kavod Adonai appeared to all Israel whenever they first received the manna. Whenever they get to Mount Sinai, it says the Kavod Adonai comes down in front of all of Israel. They saw the Kavod Adonai on the mountain, and that the appearance, the way the Kavod Adonai appeared to them was as a consuming fire. So what is it Moses is actually asking to see? Evidently, it's not the same Kavod that he's been speaking to and talking to, seeing in this column of fire and smoke daily since he left Egypt, right? That all Israel saw. What he's actually asking for is to see the actual reality that is Adonai. And this is why he was told, I can't show you who I am, because nobody can see me while they yet live. It's impossible to see in a physical form the reality of who Adonai is. Excuse me, that's my alarm here. And so whenever we actually also, let me just bring this up. I think it's Numbers chapter 12. Miriam and Aaron began to complain about the Cushite that Moses married, and they all, which wasn't really a problem in itself, but they questioned the prophethood of Moses. And when they said, doesn't God even speak through us, and not only Moses? So they were basically elevating their role of prophecy as being equal with that of Moses. And then Adonai says, hey, you guys come to the tent of meeting, I've got to speak to you. And he basically told them, he set them straight. He says, look, if there's going to be a prophet amongst Israel, then I will reveal myself to him in a vision or a dream. However, this is not the case with Moses. I will speak with him. I speak face to face. And he will behold the Tamunat Adonai. The Tamuna means the actual form of Adonai. What is it he's beholding? That's this Malach Adonai, this column of fire. And that's why it says he went into this column of fire. He went into the outer veil where God was. And so that's what we're seeing here. Hopefully I made that clear. If not, feel free to write questions to me and I'll answer them. Of course, I'm not very often on Facebook, so it's better if you want to write questions, write them in YouTube, on the YouTube channel. And I'll get them quicker because I deleted Facebook and WhatsApp from my phone, so I don't have those two platforms anymore. So anyway, we have the Chabod Adonai, which is this, who is actually the Malach Adonai, who was going in front of the camp. Now he goes to the back of the camp. And so verse 20 clarifies it. Verse 19. So the Melech Elohim, who was going before the camp of Israel, he went behind him, and the cloud that was also journeying, he went behind him and stood behind him. Verse 20. ויבוא בין מחנה מצרים ובין מחנה ישראל ויהי הענן והחושך ויאיר את הלילה ולא קרב זה אל זה כל הלילה. And so he came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And so the cloud and the darkness, choshech, this is basically the outer veil that we're talking about. And so the cloud and the choshech, and he illuminated the entire night. So this fire, this column of fire, of course, was lit all night long, so that this one didn't come near to this one, meaning the two camps didn't come in even close to each other. They didn't approach each other the entire night. Verse 21. ויית משה את ידו על הים ويولخ أدوناي إت هيام بروح قديم عزة كل هالليلة وياسم إت هيام لحربة ويبقئوا همين. And so Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Adonai caused the waters to go by an east wind, or a strong east wind, the entire night. And so he set the sea as a dry land, or dry ground, and the waters were parted, were split. Verse 22. ويبوء بني إسرائيل بثوق هيام ביבשה وحمיים להם חומה מימינם ומשמאלם. And so the children of Israel, they went in the midst of the sea on dry ground. And the waters were as a wall for them on the right and on their left. That would be a crazy sight to see. Verse 23. Oh, also, that's something else interesting. One of my comments I usually make about the prophet who's like Moses, there are certain things that is said for Joshua that's not said for any other of the prophet. And one is being in the presence of the Kavod Adonai, and he's told to take off his shoes because that's holy ground where he's standing. That was one. Joshua was actually with Moses as he received the tablets of law, similarly to Aaron being with him when he went up the first time and heard the covenant of God. Moses went up alone the third time to receive a new set of laws with the tablets that he had to carve out himself. Joshua was the only person who remained in the tent of meeting in the presence of Adonai as Moses came out from meeting with Adonai and spoke to the people. And one other thing is the splitting of the seas. Now, I don't think Joshua was the only one. I think Elijah, it was either Elijah or Elisha, one of the two actually did the same thing. He took his mantle and split some waters. But that's one of the things too, that the Jordan stood up in a wall, or actually on one side, basically cut the stream, and just one side stood up and then went across on dry ground. So just some similarities there. 23. ويردفوا مصرعيهم ويبوءوا أحرهم قل سوس برعوا ركبوا وبرشاو إلتوخ هيام. And so Egypt pursued, and they went after them. All the horses of Pharaoh, the chariots, his chariots and his riders, into the midst of the sea. Iltoch, in the middle of the sea. Verse 24. Wehi Ashmoreth Habocher ويشكيف أدوناي إلى محاني مصرين بعمود إيش وعنان ويحم إت محاني مصرين. And so at the morning watch, Adonai peered out. Yashkef. This verb shakaf is actually the same root where we're told in the story of the Pesach we have to put the blood on the mezuzot, which are the two doorposts, and the mashkof, which is the lintel over the doorpost. And so this is talking about someone peering out, and it uses the same verb root, shakaf. this is the Hifil form. It says, and so Adonai Yashkef at the camp of the Egyptians from in the column of fire and cloud. So again, we have another interchanging between the Malach Adonai, the Malach Elohim, and Adonai himself. All right. And so it says, Wayahom et Mahane Mitzrayim, which literally it means that he basically, this is the Hamam, which literally means to agitate or to excite them. Shabbath Shalom, Ephraim. We are in chapter 14, and I'm about to start verse 25. Okay, verse 25. وَيَسَرْ et ofan مَرْكَبَتَاv وَيَنَهَجَيْهُ بِخَوَيْدَوْث وَيَوْمَرْ مِtzrayim הנוסה מפני ישראל כי אדוני נלחם להם במצרים. And so the wheels of the chariots, of his chariots, left off. This is what you saw. And so they drove the chariots with heaviness. So it made the chariots really hard to move. And so Egypt said, let's flee. Let's get away from the face of Israel, because Adonai wages war for them against Egypt. So that's the end of the third Aliyah. And now we begin the fourth Aliyah, verse 26. وَيَوْمَرْ أَدُونَي إِلَى مُوشَى نَتَّ يَدَكَ عَلَى الْحَيَامِ وَيَشُوهُ هَمَايِمْ عَلى مِصْرَيِّم عَلى رِقْبَوْ وَعَلى Parashath. And so Adonai says to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea and let the waters return over Egypt, over his chariots and over his riders. Verse 27. وَيَيْت مُوشَى et yado al hayam وَيَشُوف hayam לפנות בוקר לאיתנו ומצרים נסים לקראתו وَيَنَعِرْ أَدُونَي את מצרים בתוך הים. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the water returned at the coming of the morning. So this happened in the morning watch. And so as the sun is coming out and the light is starting to change into what's called a boker, then the waters returned to its strength, meaning the walls came tumbling down. And Egypt, as far as the Egyptians, Nasim Lukrotha, they were fleeing to meet it. They were running to get away from it, basically what it's talking about. And Adonai Yana'ir basically means he put them in a frenzy. So he put the Egyptians in a frenzy in the midst of the sea, which you can imagine that you're in the middle of this sea, however far apart it was. The army of Israel's there. The Israelites have already gotten out. This is just as the morning starting to become morning. It's probably still dark, in the sea crossing. The wheels came off their chariots, and while the Israelites went across on dry ground, these chariots are not drivable anymore. It was too heavy to drive. And now they see the waters. Now, I don't know how wide this path was made so that the Israelites can come through, but you got 600,000 men of war they had to cross, and that doesn't count the women and children and all their property, the animals they had to take with them, and all the wealth. These guys didn't leave dirt poor beggars from Egypt. They took the wealth of Egypt with them. And now, so they took the wealth of Egypt. They also took the food. And now they have the army of Egypt in the middle of the sea. And so naturally, they're going to be terrified that they can't get out of there and the water's starting to come back. So they're trying to flee to get away from it, and they're not going to escape. Verse 28. وَيَشُوا هَمَايِمْ وَيَخَسُّوا إِتْ هَرَيْخَيْف وَإِتْ هَبْرَشِيمْ لِخُلْ حَيْلْ پَرْعُو هَبَّئِيمْ أَخَرِهِمْ بَيَامْ لَوْ نِشْعَرْ بَهِمْ عَدْ إِحَاث. So now you have all of the army and all of the horses, the chariots, and all the men who went into the sea. It says, and the waters returned and covered the chariot and the riders and all of the army of Pharaoh, the ones that went in after them in the sea. Not one of them remained. Oh man. Well, you know, I got some I don't know how to get rid of that. Yeah, I got somebody decided that the Torah study is the perfect time to advertise buying flowers. Anyway, I apologize for that. I don't know if it shows up on your stream. But if it does, I apologize. I can't get it off. I don't see the way to boot anybody. So not one of those chariots or one of those riders or horses, the army of Egypt that went in, is now destroyed. ובני ישראל הלכו ביבשה בתוך הים, והמים להם חומה מימינם ומשמאלם. Now, this is Rich and Cheyenne. You guys will remember this. We spoke about this yesterday or the day before that in one of our discussions. This is what's called the disjunctive vowel. Disjunctive vowel is a vowel, which is normally a conjunction. It's at the beginning of a clause, which means it's at the beginning of a verse, and it's prefixed to a non-verb. So when you have a prefix to a non-verb like that, then it becomes a disjunctive vowel. And basically what that does is it breaks the narrative. Normally you have what's called the vowel consecutive, which has many different functions. Among those functions is that it basically continues a narrative sequence. So you have actually sequential events. This happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And this is why you have always, you have the Wayasar, Wayomer, Wayet, and so forth. You have this conjunction vowel, which is called the consecutive vowel, with a verb form. Whether it's perfect or imperfect doesn't make any difference. And so when you see this construction, that's your sequential order of events. However, when you see something like this, then you know that this is actually a disjunctive. And of course, this will be clear because the Israelites have already crossed over, right? And so you have to put this in as a parenthetical statement, Uveni Yisrael. However, the children of Israel, they went on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were for them as a wall on the right and left. So this doesn't mean that they went in after the Egyptians. we already saw that they went in prior. They went in, came across, the Egyptians came in, the waters came crashing down, and now we have it saying as a parenthetical verse, and that's why you have this disjunctive while here. You can't use, you can't say وَيَلِخُوا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ بِالْيَبَسَةِ. That would be putting it in a sequential order, meaning that would have happened after the Egyptians just got drowned. Wouldn't make any sense. So hopefully you guys picked up on that. Verse 30. وَيَوْشَعَ أَدُونَي بِيَوْمِ هَاهُ إِتْ إِسْرَائِيل مِنْ يَدِ مِصْرَيِّم وَيَرَ إِسْرَائِيل إِتْ مِصْرَيِّم مَيْت عَلَى صِفَاتِ حَيَّاةٍ. And so Adonai saved in that day, saved the Israelites in that day from the hands of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea. Verse 31. وَيَرَ إِسْرَائِيل إِتْ حَيَّاةَ هَغَدَلَا أَشَرَ عَصَى أَدُونَي بِمِصْرَيِّم وَيِرْأُوا העם את אדוני ויאמינו באדוני ובמשה עבדו. And so Israel saw the great hand by which Adonai worked against Egypt. And so the people feared Adonai, and they believed in Adonai as well as in Moses, his servant. Now this phrase, Hayat Hagadah, this is not necessarily talking about a great big old hand. Yad indicates your ability to do something, your ability to act, and therefore it represents a power. And so when you see this phrase, Yisrael et Hayad Hagadah, and so Israel saw that great power, which Adonai worked against the Egyptians. That's what he's talking about. And so when you see in the phrases, he brought them out with a strong hand, it's talking about great power. It wasn't a physical, literal hand. Okay, now we come to chapter 15, and this is the great song of Moses, or the Song of the Sea. This is really poetic. I hope you guys can hear. All right, how's the sound before I start on this one? Does it sound okay? One if you hear me, two if you don't. Or don't write, and then I know nobody hears me. Wonderful working with delays. All right. Thank you, April. So, chapter 15, verse 1. As Yeshir Moshe uvnei Yisrael et hashira hazot la'Adonai u'yomeru lemor. Ashira la'Adonai ki ga'o ga'a suz wa'rochevo rama bayam. Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to Adonai, and they spoke, saying, I will sing to Adonai because Ga'o Ga'a, which literally means because he was really exalted. Ga'a means to be exalted. It also can mean to be proud or arrogant, but here it just means to be great and exalted. Horse and its rider he cast into the sea. Verse 2. عزي وزمرة يا ويهي ليشوع زي إلي وأنويه Elohe Avi وأرم منه. Ozi, which means my strength, was Zimrat Yah. Literally, this means and the song Yah. My strength in song is Yah. But the way it's written, you could understand that as being in a construct form. My strength and the song of Yah, which is a short form of Adonai. For he has become to me as salvation. This is my God, and I will enshrine him. Now, I say enshrine. A lot of people say I will praise. But we will see this word used again in the same context here in just a minute, talking about the house of God, the dwelling of God. This is the Hifil form. And the root is Nun Wow Hey. And usually, like I said, they translate this as being to praise. I will praise him. But I say, I will enshrine him. And you'll see why as we go through the song. The God of my fathers, and I will exalt him. I will lift him up. Verse 3. Adonai ish milhama. Adonai shemo. Adonai is a man of war. Adonai is his name. Somebody's writing me. Verse 4. مركبه برعه وحيله يرى بيان ومبحار شريشاف تبعوا بيمسوف. The chariots of Pharaoh and his army he cast into the sea. Now this word that he used, cast, now we have over here in verse 1, it says Sus Urochevo Ramabayam. Horse and his rider he threw into the sea. Okay, Rama, which means to cast. Now we have another verb, yara, he cast into the sea. Now, this word yara is actually the root of Torah. There is a notorious Karaite teacher on YouTube who produced a video some years ago who claimed that or was the root of Torah, and that's not true. That's not the case at all. It's actually yara. Here's the root of Torah. It means to throw and to cast something. Of course, it's the Hifil. Of course, it's the Hifil stem from which we get Torah, which means to instruct. But it's interesting here that we just use Ramah. He cast something into the sea, and now we have Yara Vayam. And it's the same root of Torah. Of course, don't read a whole lot into it. It's just interesting that this verb is used. And the chosen of his commanders, Tube'u Bayamsuf. Tube'u means they were sunk. This is a passive form. They were sunk into the Sea of Reeds, Yamsuf. So, verse 5. Tehomoth Yukasiyumo Yaradu Bimsolov Kemo Aven. Tehom means the depths, the abyss. And this is actually in the plural, which means the depths, plural, or the abysses, I don't know how to say that in plural, covered him. Now this word here, kasa, the root is kasa, and this is in the PL form, because you move. And normally you would see it written yakasu, but we have this as a poetic form with the mu on the end. You see that a lot, the poetic form, which means him, covered him, talking about Pharaoh and his army as a collective. Yarithu bimsoloth, they went down into bimsoloth, means the depths, but yeah, just say the depths. And they went down into the depths as a stone. So the abyss covered them, and they went down into the depths like a stone. Verse 6, Yeminecha Adonai Ne'adari Bakoach, Yeminecha Adonai Tira'atz Oyev. Yeminecha, which literally means your right hand, or it could even mean your strength. As I said, the word yad doesn't necessarily have to mean the physical hand here, but it's talking about the strength, power to act. Ne'adari is glorious in power. This yod here on ne'adari is actually what's considered superfluous. It doesn't mean my. It's just a superfluous yod, and so it's saying it's glorious in koach. This is actually a participle. The participles are verbal adjectives, and so you see them used as adjectives a lot. This is a nephal participle, and that's how it's being used as an adjective meaning glorious. Yeminecha Adonai Tira'at Oyev, your power or your right hand, O Adonai, destroyed or defeated enemies. Oyev. Oive, huh? I wonder if oive comes from that. Probably not. Verse 7. Uverov Geonecha Taharos Kamecha Teshalach Haronecha Yochelemo Kakash. In the greatness of your Geon, which is your majesty, you've overthrown those who stood against you. You sent your great wrath, your haronecha, your anger, and it consumed them like chaff. Kash is the chaff when you have grains and you're on a threshing floor. This is the chaff from that. 8, verse 8. Uveruach apecha ne'irmu mayim nitzavu kamo neid nozarim qafe'u tahomov v'lev yam. And with the ubaruach apecha, and with the wind of your nostrils, you blasted the waters, or the waters were gathered together, and the nozalim. The word nazal means to flow. Interesting, this word's used in the Arabic for revelation, because revelation flows from on high and comes down low. So when you read in the Quran, for instance, Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan. For instance, we send it down Anzalnahu, we sent it down. Anzal here is the fourth stem in the Arabic, which is a causative stem from nazal, which means to send something down. It's always from up to down. And so here we have the participle nozel in the plural, because of course water's in the plural. And so it's talking about flowing. And it's interesting that it says that the waters were gathered together like a flowing heap. And so you have these two walls, I guess it's two walls, of water in the path, but they were still flowing. And it says Kafeu Tehomoth Yam. And so the depths, the Tehom, what we talked about in verse 5, the abyss was congealed. Kafeu means they were congealed in the heart of the sea. Verse 9. Amar Oyev, Irdov Asir, Ahalech Shalal, Timla Emo Nafshi, Arik Harbi, Torishemo Yadi. So the enemy says, I will pursue and I will overtake. And we saw that word earlier. I will divide spoil. A halek means to apportion out. Shalal is spoils of war. Nafshi, which means basically my soul, but it could be my appetite will be full of him. I will draw out my sword, and I will, in my hand or my strength, will inherit him. Okay. Verse 10. نشفت بروحك كسام يام صللوك عفارت بمايم أدريم. You blew with the spirit, or with a wind, with your wind, kisamo yam, and the water in the sea covered him. Salaluka oferet, which means basically they sunk like lead in the great sea, or in the great waters. Verse 11. Mi kamocha beilim Adonai, mi kamocha ne'edar b'kodesh, nora tehilloth arutze pele. I said I wouldn't say his name. Anyway, verse 11. Who is like you? This commentate here earlier was used for the second person singular pronominal suffix. So you have cha written out, where normally you would just have the kaf, the final kaf with a comma. Now you have actually a vowel letter, and you see that very often in the Torah. But this is you. This is a second person pronominal suffix here. Amongst the Elim. Elim means the gods. O Adonai, who is like you? Ne'edar b'kodesh. Ne'edar means majestic in holiness, or in sanctity. Fearful of praises, doing wonders, performing wonders. Verse 12. Natith Yamenecha Tivlaimo Aretz. Now this is interesting here. It says you sent out your hand and the earth swallowed him. Well, who are we speaking of here? We're speaking of the Egyptians here, right? This is the song of the sea. The waters just closed the over the Egyptians, they sank down into the depths, but now it says that the earth swallowed him. So evidently, you can consider the waters also a part of the earth here. Verse 13. نحيث بحسدك عمزو جعلت. You led with your chesed. This is your goodness. This people that you redeemed. نهلت بعزك il نوي قل شخا. Now this is what I wanted to explain about the other verse here. Verse 2. So you led with your goodness this people that you redeemed. Nehalta, which means you brought or you escorted with your strength to Newe Chodeshecha, to your holy habitation. Newa. Here we have the same. This is the noun here of this is from Nawe, which means a habitation. Now, Nawe is a noun form of the verb nua, which is where we have anuehu. In verse 2, we have the hifil form anuehu, which means I will enshrine him. Okay, and I will exalt him. I will lift him up. So where's he's leading the people to his holy or his sacred habitation. In a way. This is interesting. Verse 14. Shama'u amim yurgazun khil achaz yoshevei filasheth. The people shall hear and be terrified. Chil, which is this is different than chil. Chil here means fear or pain or even sorrow. Sorrow, achaz, will take or seize, take hold of those who dwell in Pilashet, which is a poetic form of Palestine. Verse 15, as nivhalu alufei Edom, Eli Moav yochazemu ra'ad, namohu kul yoshevei Kinaan. Says, then the chiefs of Edom shall be amazed. They'll be just wow, amazed or dumbfounded. The princes or the chief ones, this is the Ale here, the chiefs of Moab, or Ra'ad will seize him or take hold of him. Now, this word Rav here means trembling, but in Arabic, the word Ra'ad means thunder. And all those who dwell in Canaan shall melt. Verse 16. تبو عليهم أي مثا وفاحد بغضل زروعك يدمو كآذن أذ يعبر عمك أدوناي أذ يعبر عمزو كنيسة. Fear and dread. Ama is terror, literally. So terror and dread shall fall upon them. The greatness of your arm, Yidemu, in the greatness of your arm, Yidemu, they shall fall like a stone. Until you bring this your people, O Adonai, across, until you bring across this people that you have possessed or purchased. Kanitha can mean either you possessed them or you purchased them. Verse 17, Tevi'emo وَتِتَّعِمُ بِحَارْ نَحْلَتَيْخَ مَخَونْ لِشِفْتِخَ פַעַלْת אדוני מקדש אדוני כוננו ידיך. And this is interesting. It says, you shall bring them in, okay, and you shall plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place where you dwell, that you have made, O Adonai, the sanctuary, Adonai, that your hand or your power has prepared. And this is one of the verses, many of the verses in this Song of the Sea that the Samaritans used to demonstrate that the place of God was already chosen. The Mikdash, the place of the Mikdash was already chosen, and that they already knew where they were going, which it seems to indicate that here in this song. So verse 18, Adonai yemloch le'olam wa'ed. Adonai, he shall reign forever and ever. And that's the end of the Song of Moses, or the Song of the Sea. Verse 19, Ki vasus par'o berichbo u'beparasha b'yam u'yashev Adonai alehem et mehayam u'vnei Yisrael. Again, this disjunctive law. Halechu b'yabasha b'toch hayam. And because the horses of Pharaoh, his chariots and his riders, his horsemen, came into the sea, and Adonai returned the waters of the sea upon them. And now again, this disjunctive law, it begins at the beginning of the clause, U'vnei Yisrael halechu b'yabasha. However, the Israelites had already crossed, they already went on dry ground in the midst of the sea. Verse 20. So I'm just going to look a minute and make sure you guys still hearing me. It's okay. I don't see any twos. Verse 20. وَاتِّقَحْ مِرْيَامْ هَنَّبِيَةً أَخَوْتْ أَهَرَونَ et hatov b'yada. وَتَيْسِنَا كُلْ هَنَشِيم أَخَرَيْهَا بِتُبِّيم وَبِمْخَلَوْف. And so Miriam, the prophetess, Nabi'ah, took, or the sister of Aaron, took the toph, which is a tambourine, in her hand, and what Teitzena and Kul Hanashim, and all the women went out after her with tambourines or hand drums, however you want to say it, and with dancing. Verse 21. وَتَّاعًا لَهِمْ مِرْيَمْ شِيرُوا لَأَدُونَي كِي גַעֹו גַעָה סוס אורי-חולו ארמה בים. And so Miriam answered them, saying, sing to Adonai, because he is great in majesty, or he has become really great and triumphant, however you want to look at that word, Ga'ah. Sus and his or horses and his riders and his chariots he cast into the sea. Verse 22. ויסע משה את ישראל מים סוף ויצאו אל מדבר שור וילכו 3 ימים במדבר ולא מצאו מים. And so Moses had the Israelites travel from the Sea of Reeds, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness, and they did not find water. Verse 23. وَيَبُوءُ مَرَثَا وَلَا يَخِلُوا لِشْتَوْتَ مَايِم مِّن مَّرَا כי מרים הם על כן קרא שמה Mara. And so they came to Mara, and they were not able to drink waters of Mara, because they were bitter, marim. And for that reason, he called its name Mara. So the place is called Mara because of that. And so that's interesting too. This is one of those things, one of those instances where we have a place name that was named at the time that they went there. We see, for instance, Bethel was called Bethel by Yaakov, but before Yaakov, it was actually called Luz. Hebron was called Kiryat Arba at the time of Abraham. Later, it was called Hebron. And so this is one of those things where they are naming the places as they go. Verse 24, وَيِدْلَوْنُ ha'am al Moshe lemor manishte. And so the people complained to Moses, saying, what are we going to drink? What will we drink? Verse 25, وَيِتْزَعَقْ il Adonai وَيُرَيْهُ Adonai eitz وَيَشْلِخْ il hamayim وَيِمْتَقُوا hamayim Shem Som Lo. Hok Mishpat Washem Nisahu. And so he cries out to Adonai, and Adonai instructed him a tree. It could be a tree, could be a shrub, is eitz. It could be even just wood or bark, depending on how you look at it. And so he cast it into the water, and the waters became sweet. Mathak, which means to be sweet, like honey. Sham Sam Lo Hok Umishpat. And so there he set for him a hok, an ordinance, and a judgment. And there, Nisahu, they tempted, or they were tested. Verse 26, وَيَوْمَرْ إِمْ شَمَوْعَ تِشْمَعْ لِقَوْلِ أَدُونَي إِلَهِكَ وَهَيَشَّرْ بِعَيْنَيْهِ تَعْسَيْ وَحَزَنْتَ لِمِtzvotah وَشَمَرْتَ كُلْ حُقَّاv كُلْ حَمَحَلَةَ أَشَرْ سَمْتِي بِمِصْرَيْم لَوْ أَسِيمْ عَلَيْهَ كِي أَنِي أَدُونَي رَفَعَيْهَ. And so he says, if you will certainly listen to the voice of Adonai your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and you pay attention to his commandments, and you observe, you guard his ordinances, all of the sicknesses which I set in Egypt, I will not set upon you, because I, Adonai, am the one who heals you. And that is the end of the fourth Aliyah. And, well, I would love to finish this parasha today. I don't think we'll be able to finish it. It's been an hour and a half, and I appreciate all of you guys joining me here. Anytime you want to come on and speak, be my guest. I have the links to the studio in Facebook as well as on YouTube. You're more than welcome to come on and read with me, ask questions, participate. That's no problem. I want to thank everybody for showing up for the Torah reading today. Of course, we have a little bit left to read of the parasha. But I'm going to try to hold these to an hour and a half, or between an hour and a half and 2 hours. I've been receiving a few complaints that these videos, man, they were getting 3 and 4 hours long at a time there the last few weeks. And so to make it pleasurable for the audience, I'll try to cut the time limit down. So if you have any questions about this week's parasha or any other question of the Torah, feel free to write questions. If you have access to my Facebook page, I don't know if everybody knows my account. It's Yaakov ben Yisrael on Facebook. I have my Telegram link to the World Alliance of Qara'im Telegram. Like I said, I'm not in WhatsApp anymore, so you can't reach me on WhatsApp. I'm not going to be in Facebook very much. I'm leaving the account open. I'll check it from time to time, but mainly that's for posting the videos. So I would like to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. For those who are still in Shabbat, we'll be finished with Shabbat here shortly. And so those who are now in the first of the week, I wish you all Shavua Tov. And again, any questions, feel free to write them here or any video. It doesn't make any difference in YouTube or on Facebook. And or write me wherever. I'm on Signal, I'm in Discord, and I'm on Telegram. I'm also on MeWe. So anyway, my throat is almost raw from reading and talking. So I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Tov, Shabbat Shalom, and next week we will be reading. Let me see what next week's parasha is. Yithro. That's going to be a good one. So we'll be reading Parashat Yithro next week, and so if you want, read the Aliyot during the week, and you can also write me questions during the week on the parasha. Or if you read through it and you have questions, write them down, and when we come to next week's parasha reading, then you can ask me here, and I'll be happy to do my best to answer them. So blessings to everyone, and thank you for spending your time here with me today. So Shabbat Shalom.